Welcome to Chubby's. What would you like today?
Hey, what you doing here?
So it's grass-fed beef from Kauai. It's a special beef blend that gets made just for us. These are our homemade burger buns too. We make these in-house, fresh every day. Yeah, I'm gonna put the cheese on real quick. My idea for a restaurant I wanted to open when I was in high school, and 15 years later, I guess I was able to do it. So I'm gonna call the food truck Chubby's. I don't know. What's happening in Hawaii?
Right, it's a long time no see, huh?
Yeah.
So what made you go over there today?
I actually wasn't headed there at all.
For real?
You know? Yeah.
You weren't really thinking of going there, you got some image in your mind and the image kind of stuck with you?
Yep.
Yeah? So you asked me earlier about intuition and coincidence, and you know, for a lot of people, that's the way it works. You know, if they're visual, they might have an image pop in their head. And sometimes we just blow it off. It's like, oh, just something's popping in my head. But sometimes those are significant. And you don't know until you look backwards that that meant something. But to be able to be more mindful of yourself, like everything that's happening with you, you know, sometimes it works against you. Like you're driving and you see a sign for like some food that you weren't really thinking about, then you start to think about it, then you start to get hungry, and then you weren't actually hungry, but then the sign made you hungry and then you go and eat, right? So people actually gain a lot of weight that way sometimes because something gets implanted into them. But if you're just kind of not thinking about nothing and somebody pops in your head or something pops in your head and that feeling grows, then sometimes, a lot of times actually that's an intuition. Yeah. For some people it's an image, for some people it's a word, for some people it's a feeling, you know, and then one thing kind of leads to another. It just depends on how people's intuition works for them. The whole intuitive process of being in the flow is sticking with what feels natural at that moment. Like the minute you start to push or pull from it, it will degenerate. It'll just become manipulation then, right? And there's a way to know that even though you're kind of manipulating things, but you're still in the flow. That's a more trickier concept though. You know, it's like when you want to help somebody, like a lot of people want to help people, but they want to help people the way they think is correct, or that they think they want to help somebody. And they're not really hearing what the other person needs, right? So having a sense of flow kind of allows you to really be more sensitive to what is needed at that moment, right? And it's not just for helping other people, it's just for like the quality of your whole life. Like if you're rushing through your day trying to cram in a whole bunch of stuff, sometimes intuition makes you stop and reassess, like what is really the most important 2 things that I need today versus the 8 or 10 things that I thought I wanted to. Okay, maybe I'm frustrated because I'm just trying to push it too much, right? And I would get more effective use out of just doing 2 things rather than, you know, a bunch. So you can be very playful with the whole intuitive process. Like a lot of people have intuitions and it comes up very serendipitous, like it's an amazing moment in the day, you know, and I still have those. Because I do it professionally, I think a lot of times I'm already in an intuitive mindset. I sort of just expect things that are what most people would think kind of strange to happen, and they do, right? And so for me, I tend to notice when I'm not in the flow more. And either way it goes, like to get into or be out of the flow, you have to be attentive to your quality of state. Like if you're getting frustrated or agitated, you're probably not listening to something in your intuition. I'm just like everybody else though. There are days where I'm not always going to be on. where I'm going to be worried about the future or thinking about the past or concerned about somebody else, and I'm stepping out of my energy. Those kinds of times I have to consciously catch it first. I think that's the hardest part, is catching yourself being out of your flow and then trying to get back into it. And that just takes clearing the space a little bit. So unless it's a real impactful moment, lots of times people aren't going to recognize it. So even what I just did with you when I asked you, like, hey, what got you to Chubby's? And then the questions that I asked you are the kind of questions that you actually have to ask yourself. And then you actually have to, and this is why I think a lot of people don't do it, it's actually kind of a lot of work. You have to go back in your memory and kind of replay it and yet also be very self-objective. Did I get there because an intuition was connecting me to somebody, or did I get there because I saw a sign and it made me hungry? And then it gets even more layered the more you do it, because sometimes to see the sign to make you hungry is what, if you want to call it, your intuition or the universe is getting to get you there. Right? So it starts to get kind of strange at a certain level, where you start with like inner intuitive messages, and then sometimes if you do it with clarity, external things can be messages, but you have to be very cognizant of, was that a subliminal message that was just a subliminal message? Just like, was that my imagination just my imagination? Or was that my intuition speaking through my imagination, or my feelings in my body, or a picture, or a rainbow, or a bird, or, you know, and so it just takes a lot of practice to begin to keep assessing it and kind of keep noting, like, what's the pattern of recognition. We're trained not to use intuition. We're trained primarily to use intellect. Right? So we have to actually re-educate ourselves a little bit. I mean, it's there, it's always functioning. Like, people think they have to become intuitive, and you don't. You just have to understand its language. It's like discovering that you can hear when thinking that you couldn't. You know, and then what is that process like? How do you integrate that? And then as you get more familiar and you practice it more, and intuition is kind of weird. Like, you have to practice without practicing. Like I said, I'm pretty much with the intention that intuitive things are going to happen to me all the time. But that came through years of first thinking that I had to develop it, and then stronger than I already had it, right? So, you know, people will ask me, like, are you gifted? And I don't know how to answer that. Like, to a certain degree, yes, but I know people who are more naturally gifted in certain areas. So a lot of it is also working at it. It's like, if you have a good singing voice, it doesn't mean that you can win American Idol. You still got to practice, and you still have to show up, and you have to, you know, work on maybe not just singing, but performance or whatever. And so there's a lot of different elements that people aren't aware of in anything, right? In anything that somebody does really well. There's a lot of stuff we don't see that they understand, right? So when I start to actually get into the meat of things, it's hard to get away from the Hollywood idea that somebody's just magically gifted. It's more like Luke Skywalker having to learn how to master the Force, even if he was given like a lot of potential at birth. Right? He still had to train, you know. So it's kind of more like that. It's there, but you have to tune it. In the Hawaiian culture, they believe that every human is this perfect bowl of light, and as we grow, little things are cast into it. They call them, you know, they just call them stones. So stone of regret, you know, a stone of remorse, a stone of hate, a stone of jealousy, you know, maybe false pride, whatever, and it blocks the light, right? So in psychology, you're going to look at every single stone and try to understand where it came from, what it's all about, and how you can fix it. In Hawaiian culture, they trusted the light without any denial, you know, like, to a typical psychologist, this might sound like denial. If I say, just empty the bowl. Like, if that's all I said, they're going to think, well, that's denial. You still have all those problems, right? They're still part of your consciousness. But the Hawaiian culture understood, like, if I empty the bowl and I trust the light is going to educate me where I was wrong. And once I'm pono, once I'm good, the past is the past. I mean, because fundamentally, you can't really alter anything in the past. You can only alter your perception of it. So if you can find peace or make peace because you've emptied the bowl and you can see how you participated in being wrong, then you can just basically like let it go. And the gained wisdom, then you're a better person in that sense, because the light has educated you to your wisdom, and you know you're not going to repeat it. So in a true sense of repentance, you're not going to do that again, because your wisdom is teaching you, like, I'm not going to go back to that jealous, hateful, remorseful, whatever state that was in. I'm going to be able to avoid it now because I have this wisdom and I have the light to turn to. In some ways, when you're taught not to trust your light, you're not learning anything about self-sufficiency. You're not trusting yourself or everything that connects you to everybody else. Well, I hope what we discussed about today, like, gives people something, to kind of improve the quality of their life. If nothing else, just to be more in touch with themselves. I'm sure that'll bring up more and more things that we could talk about in the future.